Hello and welcome back to the page. I'm your host, Ashriel Moore, the ambassador of the African Diaspora Collective right here in Israel. I ran into this video not too long ago of this brother who calls himself a Karaite Jew, who went great lengths to try to disprove, to debunk, to tear apart the identity of Hebrew Israelites. Now, I'm a Hebrew Israelite, if you didn't know. I'm a member of the African Hebrew Israelite community here in the Village of Peace in Dimona, Israel. And when I was looking at the video and I was watching, I was listening to what the brother said because, I'm interested in listening and hearing what people actually have to say. I don't necessarily agree at times, but it's okay. You don't have to always agree. But I want to hear what people have to say, what their viewpoints are, so that I can be able to, where I can, contribute to help them to be able to have a better understanding about Hebrew Israelites, about the identity, about the history, which clearly most people are not aware of because they just don't invest enough time and energy to study, to learn, to understand, but they invest more time in trying to debunk, trying to disprove, trying to rip apart, which is just not possible. But what I want to do is listen to this video from this brother and go step by step, stage by stage throughout the video, contributing to helping people to understand, first of all, where this brother is erring, and then secondly, to put the proper context to things that he's saying, which are all the way off. So let's listen to it and we'll go together through this video. I'll contribute through the video, and then at the end, I'll share some other thoughts about this video and about things that are similar to this. So let's go into it.
We are going to debunk these fake, phony, so-called Hebrew Israelites. The fake, phony movements that started in the late 60s, literally started in the late 60s. It's a very, very late cult. They did not exist before then. They're liars.
Okay, so first of all, in regards to Hebrew Israelite identity, right? This is not a movement, right? This is not not a cult. This is not organizations. This is a return to our ancestral identity prior to the identity that we were given once we arrived to the shores of North and South America and the Caribbean Isles. When we were taken from the western shores of Africa after our ancestors had migrated from Israel into North Africa, and then during the period of time from 635 and going forward, when the Arabs invaded that area, a significant amount of them then fled into sub-Saharan Africa and also to northwest Africa, right? And then migrated down what was called the Niger River, and then found refuge in Senegambia and Benin and Togo and Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and Nigeria, all those places along the western coast of Africa. And then they were taken from there along with approximately 199 other ethnic groups into America to be enslaved. Not all of them were taken. So you still have some of those Israelite tribes who are still residing on the western shores of Africa, like, for example, the Ashanti in Ghana, the Ga in Ghana, the Wida in Benin, the Igbo in Nigeria. These tribes are still there. They're still holding on to the pre-exilic customs and traditions and laws, and they could still show you where their ancestors migrated, our ancestors migrated and arrived to these places. They still know their history. This history has been maintained for thousands of years. It doesn't only go back to 70 AD, but it goes all the way back to at the least 721 BC, when the Assyrians then marched on the northern kingdom of Israel, sacked all of the 10 tribes of Israel. That's where you get the idea that you have 10 lost tribes. Because when the Assyrians came and conquered the north kingdom of Israel, and then kicked all of the Israelite tribes out who were residing there, they brought their own Assyrians in. You could look at this in 2 Kings and also in other historical annals. you will see then that they had brought their own people in to inhabit the land. So the people who were inhabiting the land were not the original inhabitants of the land. But this is when you get the idea of 10 tribes then being exiled from the land. And then they say that these tribes were lost. These tribes were not lost. They just simply migrated to other places and continued to hold on to their identities in these places that they went to. I mean, this information is readily available. I mean, for example, in Rudolph Windsor's book, From Babylon to Timbuktu, he gives a very clear indication of these migrations that had taken place after 721 BC and going forward. So we know where our ancestors come from. Now, the people who were taken into Americas to be enslaved, we know that there was a concerted effort to detach us from our actual identity and to provide us with a new identity. And so how did they do that? They did that in a very methodical way. First, by changing our names. So you have, if you look at the slave voyages, you have a database there of names of these people before they had arrived to America, where they were taken from, the names of the ships, and then the new names that were given to them. So when you look at, for example, videos or movies like Roots, right, by Alex Haley, you would see then that they had beat Kunta into accepting the name of Toby. Because when you change a name, then you change or you detach them from their actual identity, from their lineage, from their peoplehood, from their language, and then the subsequent generations then would not have any idea where they actually came from. They would simply mix with the locals and forget who they actually are. And this was a concerted effort during the transatlantic slave trade. Also, once they arrived, tearing the families apart, tearing the elders from the younger people, so that there would not be a continuation. Reading, writing, preaching, teaching, unless it was somebody who the slave master had appointed, was absolutely forbidden. And it was actually punishable by death. So you couldn't read from the Bible, and you couldn't read, I mean, you weren't supposed to know how to read anyways, at all. And so this was another attempt, again, to detach us from our ancestry, from our identity. But there were ways that we had maintained these things, passing them down through oral traditions. By song, like singing about, they didn't sing, they was taken from the western shores of Africa, but they were not singing about the western shores of Africa. They were singing about Canaan's land, about beyond the Jordan River. And some people would say, yeah, but this is because some Jews came in and taught them, and then they had access to the Bible. No. You could look at these historical annals that show, for example, when Mungo Park came into Western Africa, the British adventurer had come into Western Africa. He then was exposed to biblical texts, right? Just in the Arabic language, because during that period of time they were speaking Arabic. But these were biblical texts that there were no way in the world that these people could have gained access to during the period of time that he had come to visit. And they had no idea that there were people in other places that were actually still practicing. They thought that they were the only ones on the western shores of Africa. So they maintained these things. They knew who they were. When you look at the book of Olodo Equiano, who was given his own personal account about what he had practiced, right? What he remembered from the practices of his ancestors, of his family. He was talking about how they observed the Passover. When you look at books from the Astound brother and my big brother, Remy Ilona, he gives a very clear breakdown of the connection between the Igbo and the Israelite identity, and how the Igbos are Israelites who had migrated to the western shores of Africa. So these are just a few of those sources that will allow you and anyone else to be able to go directly and to actually study these things. So this is not anything that was created suddenly in the 1960s, like he said. First of all, you had Prophet F.S. Cherry. You had William S. Crowder. This was in the 1800s. Later on, you also had Arnold Josiah Ford. You also had the commandment keepers under Rabbi Matthews, Winworth Matthews, right? Even beforehand, you had those who gave accounts about Nat Turner knowing that he was actually an Israelite. So these things didn't happen in the 1960s. But again, I mean, if you don't know, then you would be in a position like this brother trying to debunk something without even understanding what it is that you're even talking about. These things, but being a Hebrew Israelite does not mean that you're part of just a community. It's an identity. It is a heritage. Why Hebrew Israelite? Where does the name come from? Well, we know that being a Hebrew is actually coming from the lineage of Abraham. So all of Abraham's children, because he was a Hebrew, not necessarily because Eber, who was one of his ancestors, they say the name comes from Eber, who was one of his ancestors. But in terms of the promise that was given to Abraham, that in his seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, and the land of Israel was actually promised to his seed, that promise then would move through not all of his descendants, but specifically Isaac, Jacob. Ishmael would have his own 12 princes. These are things that are in the Genesis. Ishmael would have his own 12 princes who would also be great nations. But that is not specifically dealing with the promise of the Israelite nation. So when we say Hebrew Israelite, we're simply denoting where that lineage that we're talking about continued through Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. Not through Abraham and then Ishmael, not through Abraham and then Esau, but through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's why we specifically focus on us being Hebrews of the Israelite seed, of the Israelite lineage. So that's why we say Hebrew Israelites. But it's just denoting our identity, our ancestry. But it has nothing to do with modern names, because you have modern names, for example, Orthodox Jews, conservative Jews, Reform Jews. All of those sects, these are not ancient sects. These sects were actually established after the Enlightenment period in Germany, in Europe. They had borrowed these ideas from the Catholic Church, because they have these different sects in the Catholic Church. But these things were not dealing with or had no connection whatsoever to the ancestral lineage of Israelites, of Judeans, of Jews who had resided in Judea. So anyone could say also that those things are pretty much new. I mean, those things are modern. You look at Beta Israel, Ethiopian Israelites, Jews. You look at Bnei Israel from India. These people knew nothing about these things. I mean, you look at the Limba in South Africa. They knew nothing about Reform, Orthodox, Reconstructionist, conservative. They just were Jews, Judeans of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, who resided in Judea. But they also knew that they're connected to their Israelite ancestry from Israel as well. So that's where that actually comes from. Let's continue.
The real truth is that real Jews, real Israelites, have always existed since the time of Moshe until today. And I will prove this today. First and foremost, DNA. A lot of these fake, phony movements, these Cushite remnants, are against DNA. Why is that? Because Cush is the father of all the black race, from the father Ham. Ham had a son named Cush, who fathered the entire black race. Now, DNA proves the origins of every black person on this earth. If you haven't done DNA or you don't deal with DNA, here it is. The origins will point for every black person on earth, the Horn of Africa, as the starting point. This is why they don't like DNA. The starting point for every Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Samaritan, and so forth, guess where our origins begin? The Levant corridor. And where is that? Right there, where Israel is, Jerusalem, and so forth. This is why they don't like DNA. This is one major problem they don't like to deal with.
Let's stop it right here, because DNA has no relevancy at all in this conversation. I mean, as far as the points that he's trying to bring through. And why do I say that? Because first of all, when you look all the way back, right? At the formation of the nation of Israel. The formation of the nation of Israel was approximately 74 souls who had went down into Egypt. And then, according to the biblical narrative, approximately 600,000 men, and then you also had women and children, had come up out of Egypt. So we're talking about approximately 2 million people based on some accounts. And then they became a nation in the wilderness of Sinai, where the Torah was actually given to Moses. And that's where they became the nation of Israel. So when you look at the biblical narrative, it talks about then a mixed multitude. A mixed multitude of who? A mixed multitude of other tribes from Egypt who had come together with the Israelites, and they all came out as one and then became a nation at that point. So in terms of the nationhood, or the idea of the nationhood, it has nothing to do with your DNA. It has everything to do with your subscription to the laws, to the commandments that were given by God in the biblical narrative, because he's specifically talking about the biblical narrative. So I'm going to talk about what he's talking about, the biblical narrative. So that's your connection to the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel then is made up of people who are following those commandments. That's what keeps you in alignment with the God of Israel. And DNA does not play any part in that at all. Okay, these are the people who were actually chosen to be a nation. You were chosen to be a nation of priests, a people that are set aside, not because of your DNA, not because of your identity, not because of who you are, not because of where you're born to, because of your connection to this specific idea of the Torah that was provided to those on Mount Sinai. So that DNA has nothing to do with that. But besides DNA, we know that people for generations have always intermingled, always intermarried. The Israelites in Israel, in Canaan, they intermarried, although based on the biblical narrative, God specifically said not to intermingle with all of the other Canaanite tribes who were in the land. There were 7 Canaanite tribes who were in the land, said not to mingle with them. But clearly, Israelites did mingle with them. Israelites also mingled with the Cushites. Israelites also mingled with the Egyptians, right? Who would be called the Kemet at that point. The Israelites did, and the Nubians. You know, there was a lot of intermixing here. There was a lot of intermingling there. So, you know, looking at a specific identity based on DNA, that's nonsense. But not only is it nonsense, it's very irrelevant in this case, what he's trying to actually point at. Secondly, when he says that black people, as he referred to them, African people, all come from Cush, the son of, well, look, Ham, Shem, and Japheth were of the same parents. You did not have 3 different people born to the same parents. You didn't have 3 different races of people born to one parent. That just didn't happen. Ham, Shem, and Japheth were all born to Noah and his wife. They all were of the same lineage, with the same identity, the same people. So if the world wants to put forth that Ham was cursed and that's why he became dark-skinned, which is absolute nonsense, then Shem and Japheth are also the exact same as their brother. Full stop. Let's not even go into the nonsense right there. Full stop. And so that means that obviously everybody who is of their lineage, because Ham, Shem, and so that means that everybody who is of their lineage are also people of African ancestry. Why? Well, Cush was not the only son that was born to Ham. He had Put, that was Libya. He had Canaan. He had Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. And he had Cush, that was Ethiopia. Now, obviously, we know that at times, Cushites were mistaken for Egyptians. Egyptians were mistaken for Israelites. I mean, these people were the same people, so they were mistaken for each other at times when obviously they were either in the close proximity with each other, or when somebody came in contact with them and couldn't be able to identify the differences between them. Like today, I mean, some people find it hard to be able to differentiate between various African peoples. Oh, this one is from Senegal, but this one is from Cote d'Ivoire, and this one is from Ghana. Most people have a hard time with trying to differentiate between these people because, if you're not internal with these people, then you may not understand, the different patterns in the face. You may not understand the languages. You may not understand the build. So there are a lot of things that you could be pretty much thrown off from if you're not somebody who could actually identify and differentiate. And then it will be hard also because if somebody from Cote d'Ivoire married somebody from Nigeria, and now you have a Nigerian married to Cote d'Ivoire, now this is a mixture of a Nigerian and Cote d'Ivoire, and then where are they actually from? How are you going to be able to differentiate? This person has a mother from here and a father from there. So it's absolute nonsense trying to deal with this in this sense. But of course, we are from the Horn of Africa. Absolutely. And based on scientific evidence, that is the origin of civilization. So not only are we, the oldest bones and ruins are actually found in the Horns of Africa. So not only are we from there, the entire world's population is also from there. So there are no people from different places. Based on, I don't know, maybe there are other scientific evidence that could be able to prove otherwise. But for now, this is what we have. That the origins of civilization started in the area where he called the Horn of Africa. And so in addition to that, he says that the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic and others, their roots are actually traced back to the Levant, as he called it. Besides the fact that the Levant is not an actual geographical location, but it is a name that was given to the area by the French in 1492 that was supposed to denote this area being east of France, where the sun rises, right? That's why it's called the Levant, to rise in French. This is where that name actually comes from. So it does not denote specifically a geographical location. But the people who are here, these are people who are migrated from, obviously if civilization began in a certain place, then those people would have just migrated to other places and began then to populate other places in the world. So that means the people who are also there in this area that he calls the Levant, these are people who had migrated from where civilization started. It just makes perfect sense. In Israel, Israel's actually in Africa. Who said that? I didn't say it. Israel sits on the African tectonic plate. The only thing that is separating Israel from the African continent proper, which is Egypt, is the man-built Suez Canal that they began the construction of it in 1859 and they finished the construction in 1869. That is the only thing that actually separates the Israel and Sinai Peninsula from mainland Egypt. So now the next thing you're going to have to say is that Egypt is not in Africa either. But in Hebrew and Aramaic are Afro-Semitic languages, African Semitic languages. There are a lot of cultural similarities between the people who had resided in this area and people from sub-Saharan Africa. But let's continue.
Most powerful proof text, the one they use to convince uneducated biblical students to their movements. Deuteronomy 28:68 speaks about slave ships and slavery. Well, they say, who else? We went through slavery, slave ships, we have it in the bag. We are the Israelites. Again, no, you don't read in context. Verse 52 specifically says, that these abominations, everything that's going to happen of these events, will happen in the land that I promised your forefathers, which is Israel, not Africa. When did this happen? In the year 70, when the second temple was destroyed by the Romans. In the war of the Romans and the Jews between the years 66 and 70, the Second Temple was destroyed. And we have well-documented evidence, a lot of it, that the actual Jews, myself and my forefathers, were taken on slave ships to Egypt. And another point that the verse 68 says is that no one will want to buy you. Nobody will want to buy you. They'll say, no, move on. Take them out of here. We don't want them. That's exactly what happened to the real Jews. This is well documented. That did not happen to the African Americans today, their forefathers. They were sold. They were brought into homes. A lot of them lived with families. In the end, it was horrible. But it did not happen that way. They were sold all over the place. So it does not match the slavery of the South at all. It matches beautifully with Jewish history, Israelite real history after the year 70.
Okay, so let's stop it here again. I mean, we already just established the fact that obviously Israel is in Africa. That's geologically and geographically proven, right? So we don't even have to deal with that anymore. But secondly, when we're talking about Deuteronomy 28 and 68, that is just one of so many other verses that gives a very clear indication, specifically dealing with those people who are going to go into the Western Hemisphere to be enslaved. It's not talking about all the Israelites, because obviously it says that we're going to be scattered to the four corners of the earth. But this is specifically just dealing with those who were taken into the Western Hemisphere. But not to say that there are those who were not, the Ethiopian Beta Israel, or those people who were chased out of Israel and had found refuge in North Africa and then went over into Spain and then were chased out of Spain and went down into sub-Saharan Africa and others, or went from Spain to other places up in Europe, that they were not taken by ships to be enslaved. Those who had migrated to Arabia and to other places, and then afterwards came back over into Ethiopia, they were not taken as slaves. So not everybody was taken into the Americas to be enslaved. So nobody is saying that this is the only indicator for people who are of the Israelite tribes. If they do not meet this criteria, then obviously they don't exist. No, that's not what anybody's saying. But let me read it so that you can be able to have a proper understanding. Deuteronomy 28 and 68 says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way wherefore I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there you should be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. No man should buy you." But no man should buy you, one, does not mean physically buying you. It means to redeem you. It means to bring you out of the current state that you're in. It means to change whatever it is that you're experiencing. No man could be able to do that. It would have to be inspired by people who are inspired by God to be able to bring you out. That's what that actually means in its proper context. And when it says into Egypt again by ships, that means that it's not talking about the original enslavement in Egypt, because you don't need to arrive into modern day Egypt or into ancient Egypt from Israel by ships. People walked that. So ships were very much irrelevant in that case. So when it says again by ships, that means that it'll be a similar circumstance. So you were enslaved once in Egypt, and now you're going to be enslaved in another place that'll be similar to what you had experienced before. The conditions will be similar to what you had experienced before. You're going to be enslaved in another place that is a reminder of what you experienced before in Egypt. So this will be a new Egypt. This is not going to be the same Egypt. It's not going to be the same geographical location. It's not going to be the same place, but you will be taken via ships. And yes, the people who were taken into the Americas and enslaved via ships actually do fit this information here, right? They do fit this description. But you also have other scriptures like Genesis 15:13, where Abraham is being told that he should know for a surety that his seed will be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they will be afflicted for 400 years and then come out. Well, those who went into Egypt the first time, they were not afflicted in Egypt for 400 years. They spent 430 years in Egypt, but they were not enslaved for the entire period of time that they were there. So obviously it had to be talking about a futuristic occurrence. And the only 400-year period that I know of people being enslaved that could meet this criteria are clearly people who were enslaved in the United States of America. Not to say that these are the only people who meet the criteria of Israelites, but these are the only people who actually meet these criteria in terms of being able to acknowledge where a portion of those Israelites were taken and enslaved and are expected to return from. So we can be able to then deduce that, okay, there are Israelites then in America who meet this criteria. Okay, based on some other migration patterns, there are Israelites in West Africa. Okay, based on migration patterns, there were some who would arrive who were taken by the Romans into Rome and into Spain. And then they started to migrate to other places. And obviously they began to intermingle there. Clearly there were those who went over into Arabia. So we know that there should be some found there. We know that there were some ones who were taken also over into India. So there should be some found there. We know about the Karaite Jews over in China. So we know that they're all over the world. So I don't see why is that an issue then if there are some who are also in the Americas who meet this criteria. But this is not the only scripture that we refer to when talking about some of those plagues that we were going to experience because we turned our backs on the God of Israel. Let's continue. Oh, by the way, he said also Deuteronomy 28 and 52, he said, speaks specifically about all of these things occurring in the land. Well, let's read that. Deuteronomy 28 and 52. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Well, we know that between 66 and 70 AD, Jerusalem was besieged by the Romans. And then the walls fell down in 70 AD. And then obviously Jerusalem was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed. A significant amount of those Israelites were exiled. Some also fled. A bunch of them were killed. We know this based on accounts from Josephus, for example, who gave his account about the occurrences during that period of time. We know this also from Philo, who gave his account during that period of time. So we know about the basic occurrences there. So I don't really understand, but what is the relevance to 28 and 68? I mean, the besieging happened, but the Deuteronomy 28 and 68 is a futuristic occurrence. I don't know what point he was trying to make here, but most likely he don't know what point he was trying to make here. The final point that I want to make here is that anyone who is confident in their identity, anyone who is confident in what they're saying, anyone who is confident in their heritage, they don't need to, they don't feel insecure. They don't need to debunk other people in order for them to be able to stand up like men and women and be proud of their ancestry, be proud of their identity. They just simply allow other people to be what they say that they are. And I mean, we're not going to fight it. We're not going to argue with you. If you said that you're that, keep the commandments. Walk in accordance with the laws and the ordinance and the statutes that had made Israel a nation in the beginning. That's it. If that's who you say that you are. Otherwise, you can say whatever you want to say. We could be able to look at your practices and know if you are or if you're not. We don't care if you are or if you're not. You say whatever you want. We are focused on who we are, what we are. Up until now, Hebrew Israelites all throughout have always been the ones who were vilified, have always been the ones who were rejected, have always had other people trying to dictate for us who and what we are and who and what we're not. And then when you had some organizations who then gave that same energy back to people who were continuously trying to debunk our identity, continuously trying to reject who we are, continuously trying to demean and diminish our authority on determining for ourselves who we actually are because we know who we are, then that's when things get shaky and sensitive and problematic. But all throughout, when people were saying to us that rejecting the commandment keepers, saying no, we don't want you all on a board of rabbis along with us, until recently that they actually opened up to that idea. We haven't been the ones who were trying to we were trying to, okay, So you all say that you all are Jews. You all say that you all are Jews. You all say that you all are from the house of Israel. You all said, okay, so we are from some of those tribes that were exiled, and we have come back now with the family. So if you are who you say you are, you would welcome your brothers and sisters. I mean, isn't that what it says, that at one point or another, all the 12 tribes of Israel will be regathered once again? We should be looking for all the 12 tribes of Israel. But when people are coming and saying that they are of the tribes of Israel, instead of you welcoming them, instead of you being happy about now reconnecting with your family, if you're really from the family, you're rejecting them, saying that they aren't. So, okay, you know what? You're rejecting these people who say that they are. So you tell me who are. You identified me. Who are the tribes of Israel of the northern kingdom who were exiled? Where are they? Who are they? Since you believe that these people who are saying that they're not. So you tell me who are they? That's where I'll leave it. Thanks again for continuing to follow. Thank you again for continuing to walk on this journey with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below if you're connecting to any of this information that we're sharing with you. Until then, you all have a great day.